John 8:32 says, "And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." Welcome to this Wisdom for Living discussion led by pastor, teacher, and counselor Al Rosenblum. For access to Al's other studies, to request an appointment for a personal discussion, or to contact our team, go to www.alrosenblum.com.
All right, here we go. Prepare yourself through confession of sin if necessary. The Bible's a spiritual book for spiritual people. Being indwelt by the Holy Spirit enables us to understand spiritual phenomena that the Bible teaches. We have to be filled with the Spirit. We have to be surrendered to the Spirit. Be willing to be taught. If we're willfully sinning outside of God's will, then we need to acknowledge that and confess that. So we'll do that now. Well, Father, I'm grateful that you've revealed to me areas of my life this very week where I was thinking poorly, thinking wrongly, thinking about my relationships in a wrong way that was harming them and diminishing them, and I wasn't giving due where it was due. I wasn't being respectful, Father. I didn't understand that I was demanding and I was requiring of others, and frustrated when they didn't acknowledge and didn't fall in line with my expectations. I pray that you can reveal to each of us personally and everyone who listens to these lessons these truths about our old system and how it just dominates until we remove it and put it in its place. And so give us wisdom tonight in Christ's name. Amen. If you're listening to this as a recording, then I would be grateful if you would subscribe. If you have not, there are notes available. If you'll click on the link below, the notes will pop up, and you can either print them or use them online. And therefore, okay. So just subscribe, and if you're able, if you have someone you think would enjoy these or be benefited, then the YouTube has a share feature, and you can copy the link and send it to them through an email. All right, we're in the application through the life of Joseph, and what we want to do is take the things that we've learned through Christian transformation and apply them to the lives of the family of Abraham. We're going to spend a little bit of time with Isaac and Rebekah, then with Esau and Jacob, and then a good bit of time with Jacob, and then leading into Joseph. Now we're going to focus mainly on, we're going to follow the life of Joseph and see how these principles apply that we've been learning. So, God's plan is to change our hearts to be like his own, and as we develop our heart to be like his, we produce good works, divine good, from our relational behaviors and ministry efforts. In other words, you change your heart, and out of that overflow of change comes your ministry. The focus is always on changing within, not on doing good works. Now, there are times to do good works. You have a spiritual gift. You've been put in ministry positions. You have opportunities, and therefore you should do good works. But they shouldn't be your focus. Your focus should be to change, to transform to be like Christ. Now, as that happens, again, the overflow of love and grace will go to the others around you, and that is the ministry, whatever form it takes. If it's evangelizing, giving the gospel, encouraging people, admonishing people, helping people organize, giving to people, whatever it is, it's an expression of God's love through his grace. And that's our mission. So in order to do that consistently and powerfully, we have to get ourselves out of the way. Now we're going to look at the life of Joseph, and just by introduction, it'll take me a day or so to introduce this to set us up. As we examine Abraham's family, we're going to look at Genesis from chapter 25 through 50. Now, we're not going to exegete all that and try to look at all the different language issues. We're not doing that. We're going to take the stories and we're going to extract out of the stories what we think the motives of the people are. And what are they thinking? What are they telling themselves that caused them to make the choices they did, so that we can see them in our own life? 1 Corinthians chapter 10 explains that these Old Testament believers and unbelievers were examples for us to learn from. So we're going to be looking for evidence of their old man belief system through the decisions that they make all along the way. The goal is to ask the right questions, and we talked last week about asking the right questions so that we can discern their beliefs and motives. And of course, we'll be guessing, but we'll be making really good educated guesses into their humanity, because humanity then is the same as humanity now. All right. What we want to do again is see their lives and transfer that into our life. All right. So here's what we're going to see, and this is just another summary of what we've done before. We're looking for their idolatry. What have they attached themselves to that they've made more important than God? What is it that they have desired and connected with and are pursuing, and their behavior is related to achieving or acquiring something that will make them happy more than God? Okay? That's your idolatry. We're talking about attaching hunger and thirst to people and situations for fulfillment, which is a normal and right thing, but not more than God. And so what is it in your life that if you lost or you didn't gain, would cause a breakdown in your life? So, who or what, here's your question, who or what do I want or not want? What's going on in your life that you don't want? What am I afraid of not getting? Or what is it that I already have that I'm afraid of losing? You know, people live their life and think, well, if I had a lot of money, and then maybe one day they get a lot of money and they live in fear of losing it. So they are frustrated because they want it and can't have it. Or once they gain whatever they wanted, then they go into fear mode about losing it. They've made it an idol. So who or what do I consistently tell myself is necessary for my life to be right and fulfilled? What is that in your life? Secondly, beliefs. The belief system based on the idea that man can meet our needs through relationships with human beings. Who or what am I counting on to come through for me and provide the missing link to my life? I mean, what's missing from my life, and what human being am I looking to or looking for that's going to provide that? Who or what am I telling myself has the power and ability to make my life what I want it to be? No human being has that. You may gain pleasure and contentment and wonderful things from another person in a relationship. You know, I mean, I have a wonderful wife and children and a family that I love very much, but they can't be my happiness. All right. Thirdly is our hope, our expectations. That if we can gain these objects, that our hunger and thirst will be satisfied. It's our expectation. So we attach ourselves to these people in our relationships and situations, believing they have what we need, and we're looking for that and expecting that to work for us. We begin to attach these expectations to people. Had a conversation with a man today, we were talking about our marriages and how once we get our expectations out of whack, then everything else gets out of whack. We're not relaxed and accept and be grateful for what is going on in the relationship. Instead, you begin to expect and to begin to demand and maneuver and all this, and you don't get what you want. It's not working out, and so you get frustrated. All right? So what am I expecting from the people in my life, and with whom am I consistently disappointed? With whom are you consistently disappointed? It's one of the most important questions you could ever ask. What are you disappointed about in your life? And I assure you that in some way or another, unless you're really way down the road with the Lord, you're fearful about something. You're disappointed about something. You wish it had been different. You wish it had gone different. You had done different. That this other person had loved you differently or dealt with you differently. We live a lot of our life in disappointment. So how many times have I been seriously disappointed by loved ones? Are you divorced? Have you been through divorce? And that's a very hurtful, disappointing situation. And have I cut my heart off from them? Have I built a wall between me and my loved ones? Am I numb? Have I shut it down? We did a study on marriage this morning, and Jesus said the reason Moses allowed divorce was not adultery, it's hardness of heart. Your heart gets so hardened, embittered, walled off, defensive against another human being that there's no getting through. There's no forgiveness. There's no spiritual juices flowing. It's just everything gets shut down to protect you or to punish the other person. These are the patterns that the old man produces that still are in our life under the surface without our even realizing it. And we live our lives in quiet desperation because our motives and our patterns are all mixed up. So, do I live in a perpetual state of discouragement, despair, or depression? Have I given up? Have I given up? Have you given up? Have you given up on this relationship or this situation? Have you given up on finding the contentment and happiness that your life is hungry for? That's a good thing to be hungry for satisfaction in life. But listen, it's only found in the Lord. All right, and then love. Out of this comes our love, our relational strategies that are designed to cause others to meet our relational goals. In the old man, human-based earthly system, all love is conditional. It's given to get something in return. Always. Only in the Lord. And as you've laid aside your conditional relationships or relating, are you able to give in grace? To give without needing anything back? So to whom do I give, hoping they will give back? Who is not giving back to you? And in what way are they not giving back? And what are you giving to them, trying to induce them to give? See, that's a old man merry-go-round, a loop that you're in, a pattern that you keep going through this cycle over and over again. Relationships form these patterns. And, I'm meeting with a person in the morning who's in a pattern of anger and frustration and disappointment, and then hunger for something, and then they don't get it and they get upset, and then they go through this cycle of being angry again, and then there's the big blow up, and then maybe there's forgiveness. Just a cycle. In what relationships and to what degree or under what level of pressure can I give in grace looking for nothing in return? In other words, how far down the road of grace so that even when there's pressure, even when there's more month than there is money, can you give to others trusting God like the widow's mite? See, she gave the last 2 pennies that she had. That was all the money she had for food, for whatever she needed. She gave it away. Why? Because she knew that whatever she needed, God would provide. She wasn't dependent on the 2 pennies. She was dependent on the Lord. See, the 2 pennies can easily become idolatry. You're dependent. I can't give that away. I need that for me. No. And I'm not suggesting you go out and sell everything and give it all away and then go out and hit the streets. That's not my lesson here. But what we're talking about is the level of importance we place on the earthly things. So in what relationships and to what degree am I able to give to people but in reality, I'm giving to God. This is what we're looking for, these four things in these stories, in these narratives, okay? And because this is what we're looking for in ourselves. This is what I look for in my life every single day. When I relate to other people in any way other than a godly way, and an edifying way, a giving way, a grace way, a nurturing, a love, an unconditional. If there's anything else that comes out of me toward other people, I want to know what's motivating that, because it doesn't belong in this Christian soul. It doesn't belong. It's an old man, earthly idea that I'm operating from that's causing me to be fearful or worried or selfish. Whatever. I want it gone. I want it out. Therefore, I can be free for the love of God to be expressed through my soul. I've got a clean soul. I've got a soul free from being bound up by fear or guilt or shame or anger or frustration. I want to be free of that. All right. Now, the second thing that we're going to look at is we're looking for God's grace. I mean, we're going to see Jacob is a scoundrel. I mean, he's a scoundrel. And still, God graces him everywhere he turns. God graces him. You know, his family, the way he raises his family is terrible. It's just he plays favorites. He's a polygamous relationship. He's got these, 4 women that he's using for children, and the jealousy and the infighting and everything that's going on. And yet somehow in the end, and listen, these people are the ones who have God. And in the end, God's going to turn it all back around. He's going to use his love and grace to save the world. And he's going to use Joseph to save the line of Messiah. So, all right. But as we get into this study, what you're going to see is a family, a dysfunctional family, we call it, a family in disarray. Abraham and Sarah, we're going to start with Isaac and Rebekah. And you're going to see them, they play favorites. That's where Jacob picked up this favorites idea. And they're really just confused. And what this does is sets up tremendous confusion down the line, inherited, acted out. The example of this polygamous family has set this thing up for all of Jacob's children to follow in suit. So we need to understand a couple of things. The first is the laws of divine establishment. That's what I call them, are the divine institutions. Now, I got this from Bob Thiem and Ron Adema. And so let's just go through them and see. These are the principles that God established in the human race that are for believer and unbeliever. This is for the stability of the human race. All right, so we start off with volition. And what we're really talking about is freedom. Every human being has volition and has to choose every thought, every word, every belief, every expectation, every word, every deed. You choose. Nobody makes you choose. When you say you're making me mad, not true. You are reacting to something this person is saying or doing by choosing to be mad. You have volition, and therefore you make your own choices. Okay? And when you have freedom and you make good choices, then you become a healthy person, you grow, and you have healthy relationships. The most important decisions that a person makes are to believe the gospel and attach their hunger, the hunger of their heart, to the Word of God as the answer, as the way of finding the fulfillment of that hunger. It's the air our soul breathes. It's the food our soul eats and drinks. Second divine institution is marriage. Very important. And you say, well, look, I've been married a long time, or I'm not ever going to be married again. Well, Do you have children? Do you have friends? Do your friends have children? These principles are necessary. Our nation is coming apart, not just because of corrupt politicians and corruption and the devil's plan and globalization and all of this business, the woke nonsense. Our nation is coming apart because the family has failed. It started in the 60s with no fault divorce, when people just said, well, I can do whatever I want. In the 1940s, we learned today, divorce was in America was around 2%. Now it's anywhere from 40 to 60%, depending on the situation. And so many families have just been destroyed, and the kids along with it, who now have gotten married and had their own kids, and they've divorced and their kids are destroyed, and just the whole dominoes, all the dominoes are falling. That's what's happening to America. And listen, we have a wonderful ministry in this community we're in to young people. This Willie Strickland, that I want you to pray for Willie. He's led about 100 kids to the Lord, young people, just in the last couple of years. And we had about 25 of them in our church this morning, ministering to them. To a man, they just about all of them come from terrible, terrible families where they've been abandoned. This divine establishment, this is what it's all about. So the second is marriage. And marriage is an image, a picture of Christ and the church. The responsibilities and the roles in marriage have very little to do with ability or intelligence. They may have something to do with temperament and tendencies, but the husband is the leader and the wife is the submissive minister. She ministers through submission, is an image of Christ in the church for humans and for angels. All right? It's the most basic team unit in life. It's the foundation for everything in the nation, for family. So good choices to marry a believer and conduct marriage using biblical principles is going to produce the third divine institution, which is family. Out of a good marriage comes a healthy family. And here, listen, you receive this. See, you're engaged to Christ. We're going to marry him in eternity. We're made part of his family the moment we trust the gospel, given a spiritual gift, so we have a role in the family. But healthy children are raised by parents who make good marital decisions and conduct themselves properly in marriage. Healthy children grow up and make other healthy marriages, other healthy families, and form strong nations. This is how it all works. It's a wonderful system that God put together, where good choices by your volition to marry properly and conduct yourself well by divine principles creates a healthy family. You raise healthy kids who go out and do it all over again. Out of this comes healthy nations. Global freedom for individuals. See, globalism, if the devil can pull it all under one global government, which he ultimately will be allowed to do, then he can control everything. They're going to a digital currency. That means you won't really have money anymore. You'll have a ledger, so that when you go into the grocery store and spend your money, they'll know exactly what you spent on exactly what you spent it. And if they don't like the way you're spending your money, they will simply shut down your capacity. If they don't want you buying Christian products or Christian books or anything that would cause you to be independent from their control, they'll just shut down your ability to buy it. And that will be the only system. And this is, of course, the mark of the beast stuff and all that. But so globalism is the enemy of nationalism, and nationalism is where freedom comes from for volition. You see, it's a loop, goes back for a loop. Intact nations provide freedom for people to make good choices and to evangelize and grow spiritually. Ron Adema added free enterprise or employment is another one of these principles that God established. This is for believer and unbeliever. Employment And listen, employment is not for money, not for the believer. The believer doesn't get his money from employment. Now, I know that's confusing, but it's just the truth. Money comes from God. That which you need to live your life, the logistical grace, comes from God. Your job is something to keep you busy, something to make so you can make relationships and witness to people and manifest the gospel, God's grace, in an environment where other people can see it. That's what your job's about. All right. Let's summarize a few principles. Healthy individuals make good volitional decisions about who to marry and how to conduct their marriage. So, are you in a relationship? Are you married? How are you conducting yourself? How well is your marriage going? Is your marriage growing out of the bad patterns, the hurtful patterns, the confusing and disappointment and all the things that are the mark of a bad pattern? Are you using your volition to observe yourself operating inappropriately, not like Christ would, in this relationship, causing it to form patterns that are destructive, are less than edifying? This is something you can observe and change. You want to change this. All right? And you say, well, I'm not married. Again, maybe you've got kids that are married. Maybe you've got neighbors that are married and have kids. And maybe, listen, there's so many hurting marriages. It's inconceivable that there's not someone in your periphery that you couldn't encourage about marriage. It's just the marriages are just on the rocks. Marriages that are conducted using divine principles have the best chance of producing healthy children. Okay? Thirdly, healthy children that come from healthy marriage and family units are able to marry wisely and live wisely. It's just the way it works. And it all started with me choosing well, conducting myself as a husband well, and as a father in raising my children, instilling love and grace in them, trust in God, confidence for their future, a self-esteem that says I'm worthy, I'm worthwhile, I'm a prize, so that they can find somebody else that's healthy, that will honor them and respect them and deal properly with them, so that they can go and have a wonderful life and they can produce more children and have greater marriages, and we can rebuild America from the ground up. That's, if we're going to rebuild, if we're not at the end and the rapture's not around the corner, then our job is to try to rebuild this land that we're in, this environment we're in, build it back up. All right. Multiple families and generations produce strong nations that maintain the freedom of the citizens to worship God. When COVID hit and they shut down the churches, that was the most evil thing possible. That should not have ever been allowed. It was against the law what they did. And yet, the media went along with it, and therefore everybody else, your doctors were forced to go along with it. Everybody went along with it. You know, and by the way, not everybody went along with that. You know, wear your mask. Never did that. You know, I went to the store. I went where I wanted to go. Went to church. Everything. I just didn't obey that. I'm not going to obey that. They have no right to tell me that. So, fifthly, strong nations that emphasize freedom for its citizens become a haven for the Jews. Genesis chapter 12, those who bless you, I will bless. Those who curse you, I will curse. We don't want to get into the business of cursing Jews. Although, listen about this. This is important. Romans chapter 9 and 10 and 11. All Israel is not Israel. Okay? These people some of the people that are involved in all that are not good people. Now, I'm not here to try to sort all that out, but just in your prayers for Israel, they call it praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Well, you pray for that and you let God sort that stuff out, but you're not naive. All right. The more evil takes hold of a nation, the worse off are the marriages and families, producing weak children. I was born in the 50s. I grew up in the 60s and 70s when the chaos in America hit. Woodstock, this free for all craziness of all these rock bands and these people sleeping in the ground, just quote the day of free love. What that meant was no discrimination with sexuality, and therefore that's where all this began. And the taking off and the removing of all inhibitions and the removing of social structures, this is what it's led to. So evil has definitely got a hold of this nation. It's got a hold of our children. The school system has become a source of great evil. And so our prayers and our study and our application and our love and our grace is what will win it back. God will win it back. And I want to be part of that, and I pray that you do as well. All right, and it's the same in Nigeria with emo. It's the same in the Philippines with some that we come, Roger Lemuco and Billy Morgan. It's the same anywhere. These principles have been tried and true throughout human history. All right, now the family of Abraham was made into a nation that would represent God to the rest of the world. It was a very different nation than America. All right, that was a priest nation. We're not a priest nation. We're what's called a client nation. So in spite, even with God in their lives, Abraham's children and grandchildren made a royal mess out of their family. Just a mess. Absolutely. Jacob was a passive man. He was a mama's boy, and he let the women in his life run him around and got him into polygamy and produced all these children and all this jealousy, and he played favorites, and it just was a mess. Just was a mess. And this is what many of these people were saved. They had God. So, in spite of their selfishness, greed, and envy, God ultimately used them to represent him to the world at large, and they were forced to come to Joseph to survive the famine. God put it all together. You can see God orchestrating all this and putting all this together, and you wonder why certain things happen in your life and certain things don't, and the timing of these things that happen, and it forces you to be in this place at this time so that this particular spiritual transaction can occur, and you're like, wow, how did that happen? It happened by God. Just like this story we're going to look at. You're going to see the grace of God. All right? So in spite of them, and listen, God produces divine good through our lives in spite of us. In spite of us. So, the devil knows that nations providing freedom for Christian worship and evangelism must be destroyed for the forces of evil to gain a stronger hold on the world. So wherever there's a strong nation cranking out Christian principles, operating off of divine establishment and Christian principles, where the church is doing its job, this guy's going to be after it. For many, many years, America was the source of evangelism for the whole world. And not only just America, but other places as well. And that is diminished and diminished. It's still there. We're still doing it. We're still supporting people to go around the world and preach the gospel. We're doing things with emo and different people in different parts of the world, trying to promote the gospel all over. But we all know that as a spiritual nation, the Christian church in America has become entertainment. It's either become legalism, rule following, fear-based. It's a ritual system, or it's just praise music with very little principles. It's like a do good, be a good person message, and there's no cohesion. There's nothing being put together. No categorical principles being taught and then connected to the next one and to the next one, so you can put the pieces together and see the big picture. That's what's got to happen for you to be able to have enough wisdom to see what's going on and make good decisions. Okay? So, the attack on the United States is focused on our Christian traditions, divine institutions, and now even our common sense. Oh, I mean, anything Christian is now verboten. You know, it's not allowed on the airwaves or the. It's just a all-out attack. There's a guy named David Horowitz who's written a book on the fact that the attack on Christianity. Very good book. And now, listen, our divine institutions, you know, marriage, family, and our judicial system, our legal system, our police have been attacked. Our police have been diminished. They've been corrupted. So many things that are just taking this country. And really what's going on in this country is that we've been hijacked by criminals, by thieves who are bleeding us dry. You know, we're, what, $30 trillion in debt? Where did all that go? Where'd that $30 trillion go? You know, I don't see a lot to show for it. It went in somebody's pocket. All right, whatever of it is actually real. A lot of it's just imaginary. It's just a number on a ledger somewhere. But this is all about diminishing America and shutting down the Christian church and making it ineffective. That's why our work to grow in grace and be a witness for the Lord by the way that we believe, think, feel, and speak and act, that's our ministry. And that's what the pivot is. Those believers that are operating according to God's plan. And God honors that. And he uses that to influence others. Listen, when I was saved, I'm going to say it was about 1975 for sure. Maybe before that. But I became positive to God about 77, 78. And I came to where I am now to go to be trained for ministry. We had a training program that was workable here in a school. And I ended up in ministry, I'm going to say late 20s, early, about 30 years old. I entered into ministry. And listen, it was spiritually dead. I mean, Bob Thames' ministry had been big, but it had started to shrink. I've spent my adult ministry speaking to very small groups of people, not large people. So what's happening now is all of that's coming back around. The spiritual hunger is back. And that's because these young people, they've been told so many lies. This common sense that we're talking about. A boy can be a girl and a girl can be a boy. Insane. A boy can pretend to be a girl and compete in girl sports. And they act like it's normal. Insane. People get fired from their jobs for complaining about this very thing. Just craziness. Okay? Just craziness. So, it's coming back. The kids are waking up and they're hungry, and we've got to be there. And we got to be there in our prayer life. All right? Now, the attack of the United States is focused on our traditions, our divine institutions, and common sense. Anything Christian is now considered hateful. It's hateful because we draw a line in the sand and say, if you believe the gospel, God will save you. If you don't believe the gospel and you stay on the train, that train's headed for terrible trouble, the lake of fire. That's hateful. If we don't just to go along and agree with everybody, especially these woke people. It must now be driven from the public square. Our elections, our judicial system, our government, even our health care has been hijacked for evil. I never would have understood how research was controlled. These last few years have made it obvious that the people with the money that give, these super rich people that give money for different kinds of research, climate research, they give money to people expecting a certain result. as far as scientists being free to come up with whatever their conclusion they reach, that doesn't exist. The what happens is the people that give the money, they want a specific outcome. They want a return that agrees with what will make them more money. And therefore, you have the same thing in all these different areas, and it's just criminal. So, thirdly, the destruction of all categories like male and female, our language that distinguishes differences. They call a mother as a birthing person. They won't even define what a woman is. I mean, this is you couldn't have written this 5 years ago, 10 years. You couldn't have imagined this. But this is what happened in the Soviet Union. It also happened in Nazi Germany. They changed the terminology. They began to produce propaganda that led people, like in Germany. They began to put out propaganda through the news and the radio and all that the Jews were dirty, that they were diseased, that they were like rats. And they just put this out, and people were disgusted by the idea of them. And so when it came time for them to start rounding them up, everybody went along with it. They had prepared them. They had propagandized them. They had programmed them to accept this particular outcome because these people were nasty. Oh, they're nasty. They need to be eliminated. And so everybody went along with it. That's how they do this stuff. And that's what's going on here today. Anything Christian is hateful. They just have destroyed our language and our common sense. And so the young people this is being foisted on them, they don't know any different. They're accepting it because they don't know better. But listen, it's lies. And there's a number of them at a point they know this doesn't add up. It's not adding up. My life is empty. Many of these people we've led the Lord in this community are young people, 18 to 25, whose parents abandoned them for drugs. I mean, all of this influx of drugs into young America to destroy these young families and abandon their children. In this community I'm in, many of these kids were raised by grandparents or an aunt or an uncle. Somebody in the family had to pick up the pieces, and they feel completely empty and abandoned in their life. It's a difficult thing to see, but it's where we are. And so somebody's got to take it, look at it squarely and honestly and deal with it and start to help to do that. My fellow believers, my loved ones and friends, we have to free ourselves from our own biases and our own pettiness and our own selfishness and the neediness that we've attached to the people in our life rather than God. We got to grow up spiritually. It's time. We're at a time in human history where we have an opportunity to step up and step into the gap and carry this nation and carry our loved ones through our relationship with the Lord. It's time for us to do that. We got to lay aside our selfishness. We got to learn how do we do that? How do I stop being needy? How do I stop being selfish? How do I get out of these patterns that I can't seem to break out of? That's why we're doing this. So here's my encouragement to you. Refocus your prayers and your attention on your family and friends. I know that not all of you have family. I know that most of you do, but you've got friends, you've got close ones. Focus on them, minister to them, encourage them, pray for them, love on them, make yourself useful to them. Ask the Lord. Listen, there's nothing more important than asking the Lord to open these doors of spiritual ministry and edification in your life. Just ask the Lord every single day when you get up, lead me to somebody that needs your love and grace and your truth. Lead me to somebody. Open the door, especially in my family. Okay? Ask the Lord to make you an example of grace and forgiveness. If people wanted to describe you, in just a few words, would forgiving be one of those words? That's really important. I want to be known as someone who forgives, who's someone who doesn't even go to a point where I even have to forgive, that I'm just accepting of other people's flaws and shortcomings and someone who gives back to them anyway. So refocus on your family, encourage your family, be known for grace, forgiveness, for love, for being unconditional. Encourage those that are close to you. Help others work out their marital problems. And I know people don't want you butting your nose in, and I'm not suggesting that, but be available. Be available. Drop little hints. Throw out some bait. My church this month is doing marriage, and next month we're doing dating and courtship and things like that for these young people. So there will be studies available for people for you to give these studies to. All right. So encourage the people in your life to stay married. I mean, I know there are exceptions that, if you're getting beat up or you're getting cheated on, that type of thing, then no, don't stay and get yourself hurt or destroyed and just be stubborn. That's not the goal. But so many people that divorce, if they had stayed and worked it out and humbled themselves before the Lord and found compromise and worked these things together and been willing to change their own selfishness, those marriages would have turned into something wonderful. That's the design of it. It's not designed to be given up on. It's designed to you stay in it. You stay in it and you keep working on it. You keep working on yourself. And so before, if you stay, it will get better. It will get stronger. Understanding will come about. Forgiveness comes about. Grace and love comes about. And you reconnect. It's what inspires your children. Way down the line in your marriage, you say, well, we've never really been able to work it out. Please don't give up. It's not over yet. You're still here. It's not over yet. Keep working that out. Show your children what it means for somebody to stay in there and stick in there and endure in the Lord and become an example of somebody who did not give up. Glenn Cunningham, the famous Olympic runner, he wrote a book called Never Quit. Wonderful book. All right. Let's do one more and then we'll probably be finished. Now, this is just introduction to get us into the stories. Let's talk about the inheritance. And here's what I see the thread running through all of these Genesis stories. God gave Abraham two forms of prosperity that were passed down to Isaac and then Jacob, and then through Judah and Joseph to the rest of the family that turned into becoming the nation of Israel. All right? The first was a spiritual inheritance. It was the seed of the woman. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, when God is pronouncing to them his plan of salvation, here's the first gospel. He's talking to the devil who is indwelling the serpent. And he said, I will put enmity or make you enemies between you, the devil, and the woman, and between your seed, which are the unbelievers, and her seed, which is the Messiah. How do I know it's the Messiah? Because it's singular. Her seed is a singular. Also, the Greek translation is the word sperma, which a woman doesn't have. So we're talking about Messiah and virgin birth. He'll bruise your head and you'll bruise him on the heel, which is the cross. All right, so this line of Messiah was going through Abel till he was killed. Then it went through Seth, all the way down Enoch and Noah comes through the flood, and he, ends up with Abraham, and the promises in Genesis 12 to Abraham set this whole thing up. The seed of the woman is now the seed of Abraham. All right. So here's the spiritual inheritance. Genesis 22:17. God says to Abraham, "Indeed, I will greatly bless you, and I will greatly multiply your seed," singular, "as the stars of the heavens." See, that's the Messiah. "And as the sand which is in the seashore. Your seed shall possess the gate of their enemies." So here's the seed of the woman is now the seed of Abraham. This is going to pass from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob through Judah, through David, down to through Nathan and Solomon to Mary and Joseph. All right. So here's the spiritual inheritance. And by far, this was the most important thing. But what did they all get caught up in? What did they attach themselves to? What were they all pursuing? We're going to see it with Isaac and Rebekah and Jacob and Esau. They all wanted the earthly inheritance. So the earthly inheritance was carried through the birthright of the firstborn. Okay? The firstborn, he got a double portion of all that the father owned. I copied this out of Erdman's dictionary. Let's read it. This is the word firstborn, denotes the special privileges and advantages belonging to the firstborn son among the Jews. He became the priest of the family, not just the money. He became the spiritual leader of the family. Thus, Reuben, coming from Jacob, was the firstborn of the patriarchs. And so the priesthood of the tribes belonged to him. He was supposed to be the head priest for all of the 12 tribes. That honor was, however, transferred by God from Reuben to Levi. Reuben slept with Jacob's concubine, one of Jacob's women. Of course, he shouldn't have had all those women, but Reuben got it on with one of Jacob's girls, and therefore he lost his privileges. Now, the firstborn was transferred from Reuben to Levi. And you can look at these passages. Secondly, the firstborn son had allotted to him a double portion of the paternal inheritance, all the money, all the land, all the sheep, etc. Reuben, because of his undutiful conduct, deprived of his birthright. Again, Esau transferred the birthright, or the firstborn rights, to Jacob for the mess of soup, for the soup, and we'll study that. The firstborn inherited the judicial authority of the father. This guy, the firstborn, he was the judge. If there was a dispute among the families, then he would be the judge. This is a powerful position. The firstborn rights, I don't mean to make light of it. It's nothing compared to the spiritual. And this is the whole study that I've done with you, is we attach to the earthly instead of the spiritual. We see it. We're going to see it in every one of them. All right, so he becomes the judge of the family. Let's see, David excluded Adonijah in favor of Solomon, so the father had some leeway with all this. This wasn't exactly law. Fourthly, the Jews attached a sacred importance to the rank of the firstborn and the first begotten as applied to the Messiah. Messiah was the firstborn of God, the first fruits from the dead, all that kind of business. All right, so the firstborn blessing, it was very big, it was very important, but it was nothing compared to the spiritual. So secondly, after studying how every human being initially attaches their hunger and thirst for happiness to people and earthly things, we're not surprised by the focus of Isaac's family on the earthly inheritance, on the birthright. They were all focused on it. God told Isaac and Rebekah that the older, the firstborn would serve the second. There was twins. Esau was first and Jacob came out second. So Esau was the firstborn, but God told Rebekah and I'm assuming Isaac as well, that Esau was going to serve Jacob, the reverse order. Well, Isaac wasn't happy with that, and he decides to go against God's pronouncement, and he's going to give the blessing to Esau. And of course, that didn't happen, but we see this focus on it, this attachment to it, this idolatrous view that by having the double portion, being the leader, all of that, that somehow their life would be better. Have you ever looked at your children and told yourself that you don't want them to have any problems? You want everything to go well for them. You want their whole lives to be easy street. You want them to be prosperous and have these great relationships and have no problems. Listen, if that were to be the case, they would not grow spiritually at all. The things that have forced me to grow spiritually in my life, induced me and pushed me, have been the difficulties, the shortcomings, the failures, the circumstances that you know what I'm talking about, the adversity. Adversity is what makes us grow. So why would I not want my children to go through the adversities they need to inspire them to connect with God? All right. So we're not surprised at this earthly focus. Isaac, Rebekah, and Jacob were obsessed with the earthly inheritance. But Esau really didn't care a lot about it until he realized that he had lost it. He's willing to give it away for a bowl of soup, but then when he didn't get it, when it went to Jacob, he's very upset. He wants to kill Jacob. He began to plot to kill him. That's why he went off to Laban. So, secondly, once he realized that he had been irresponsible, Hebrews 12:16 calls him, what does it call him? It calls him a bad name, like an infidel, or by giving away his birthright. He just gave it away. You'd have to look up Hebrews 12:16. So he was irresponsible by selling his birthright to Jacob, and then he realized that Isaac had been deceived into giving it to Jacob. He was enraged, planned to kill Jacob. All right. So one of the things that you see, of course, Jacob is not a child when this happens, but just like Joseph, God removed Jacob from the influence of his family. God took him out of there. Of course, he sent him to Laban, which was not any better. He was a trickster from the word go. But one of the things that I'm realizing about these kids, these young people we're dealing with who've been removed from their parents, it may have been the best thing that God ever did for them, is get them out of away from these drug addicted, irresponsible parents, and let them be raised by a grandparent. I I know that's got to be hurtful. They have to feel abandoned. They have to feel that they weren't worthy of being loved and raised by their parents. But who knows how much worse it could be had they been left in those homes. You see, Joseph was 17 when he was sold into slavery. When he was sent to Egypt, he was 17. He was 30 when he became prime minister. Okay, that's a 13-year growth period. He was a young man in this polygamous, dysfunctional family, and God pulled him out of there through the sin of his brothers and sent him off to school, sent him off to be put under adversity, to show him God was with him. The thing about Joseph, everywhere you turn, people could see in a discernible, literal way that God was with Joseph. And God sent Joseph to Egypt to put him in the fire, to chip away at his old man beliefs and get rid of the trash in his soul, and to turn him into the man that God wanted him to be, that could preserve the messianic line and have the wisdom to preserve the world at that time, at this terrible famine. So now, when Joseph was in prison, he was in prison about 3 years, I think. I'll have to look that up. But When the candlestick maker or whoever, the baker and the cupbearer were sitting there with him, and he told both of them, he told the one that was going to survive, one of them was going to die. He interpreted the dream, you're going to die. And the other one was going to be reinstated and promoted. He told him, remember me when you are reinstated, because I'm here unfairly. I've done nothing wrong. My personal belief is that had he been released at that time, he would have returned home to his father, told on his brothers, tried to reinstate all of that, and would have missed everything that he was sent there to do. So don't be in a hurry to get out under the gun. Don't be in a hurry to change your circumstances. Don't be in a hurry. Let God be in charge. Let God be in charge of your life, and let God change you. But listen, God's not going to do it for you. He's not going to do it to you. He's given you the wisdom, hopefully, to see your own wrong thinking by what you're telling yourself, and the spiritual ability to say no to it, and to understand what to put in its place so that you can be the new man. Father, we love you. We thank you for these principles. I pray that they're helpful to those who hear them. I pray that you would spread our message widely, Father, that you would bring more people to us. I pray, Father, that you would support Emo's ministry, that you would provide the finances that we need to be able to do the things to expand this class and make the copies that we need, and all that's involved, and the mechanical things that of the internet and cameras and the things that are needed for him to be able to put on a professional level class. I pray for those things, Father. I thank you for our wonderful, wonderful fellow believers here. I love you, Father, and I praise you now in Christ's name. Amen.